Hey, Father Michael here. Somebody asked me just a couple days ago where I was from, since he said it was pretty obvious by the way I spoke that I'm not from here, that my accent betrays me. And he's not the first person to have asked that question and made that observation. And it always strikes me as surprising because, number one, I don't think of myself as having any kind of accent. Even growing up in Wisconsin, as a kid and as a young adult, people would ask me, even when I lived there, where I was from, because I didn't sound like I was from there. So I don't know what it is. It could be that early theater training, or maybe it's the music, to articulate and enunciate everything. I don't know. So that always kind of freaks me out when someone says, "You're not from here, your accent is different." And that's what I said to him. I don't think I have an accent. But the other thing that I told him was that although I had lived here in Indiana for a while now, I still didn't really feel like it was home. And although I have had to build and rebuild a life here several times, I still didn't think of Indiana and Fort Wayne as my home per se. Well, so I'm thinking about that little conversation that I had with him, and I was shocked just a moment ago when I did the math. And I realized with some shock that I've lived here for 25 years. Wow. It doesn't seem that long. 25 years, which also means that I'm coming up on the 25th anniversary of my son Chris's death. I'm remembering that last night when the three boys and I spent the night in a hotel, the new Holidome, as it turns out, knowing that we were leaving everything familiar behind. We were leaving Wisconsin forever. We were going to come down to South Bend and start over, and that somehow it was all going to work to our highest good. They were not happy about it. I was not really happy about it. They had their friends and their routines and their schools and all of that. I had my friends. I had my routine. I had a job that was, well paying, and I was well respected and all of that. So I wasn't really thrilled about it either, but it seemed like a decent thing to do. The right thing to do, even, for long-term security of the family. And I remember telling them sometimes doing the right thing doesn't feel good. Well, that last night at the Holidome, which a good friend had paid for the four of us as kind of a parting gift, we hung out and we splashed in the pool, and we did what boys do, and then we would bubble in the jacuzzi for a while. And when it was time for us to get some sleep, because we had the truck packed and in the parking lot, and we were about to make that last trip out of there, we all sat together on my bed and we talked it through. Our sadness, our reluctance to leave, and our collective fears about what the future held and all of that uncertainty, that general anxiety really associated with relocating to a place where the nearest family was going to be 7 hours away. We were used to there being family literally a half-mile down the street. So it was kind of a rough night that night. And it was with heavy hearts that we went to bed and tried to get some rest. It is not easy being far from home. And so that first Christmas, we decided we needed, since we couldn't, we didn't have the wherewithal to go home, we would bring somebody of significance from home to celebrate the holidays with us. And so we invited our friend Kathy, who is, one of our beach buddies and just a fun, crazy person, a college friend of mine. So we had a big old party, New Year's Eve, in this huge, historic Queen Anne home that we had at the time, and we lit a fire in the fireplace, and we laughed, and we told the old stories, and danced around the house, and just had a crazy time. And we stayed up late, and all of that stuff that you do on New Year's Eve. But a couple days later, when it was time for her to go back to Wisconsin, we were reminded again, man, we are in many ways forced to go back into our life of uncertainty and the unknown. We'd only been there not even 6 months. Things were still not settled. Things were still not in a comfortable, structured kind of format for us. And reminded us again that we were really far from home. The words in the 31st chapter, the book of Deuteronomy, I think, spoke to me then and remind me even now of something that I still tend to overlook. Chapter 31 says, "Be strong and courageous. Don't be afraid. Don't be terrified, because the Lord your God goes with you." God will never leave you, will never forsake you. Those words spoke to my soul then, and they still speak to me now. Because ultimately, now that I'm old and crusty, ultimately, I think I have learned a couple things in my many years on the planet. And one of them is a lot of what we feel and think is really of our own choosing. So those words in Deuteronomy chapter 31 speak to my soul, and they remind me that I can choose to feel better no matter what is going on in my life. No matter how far I feel from home, no matter what crappy ass decisions I make in this life, no matter the consequences I may have to, suck up and endure because of my choices. No matter how lost I get, no matter how lost I feel, God ain't going nowhere. God is always going to be in that moment with me. 25 years blows my mind. Do I still miss home? Yeah. Do I miss being by my siblings and the lake shore where I grew up? Oh, hell yes. Yes. Almost every day. Do I miss all of the things that I did with my sons back then? Of course. But I also have to admit that maybe if I had stayed home, I would not have found the courage to step out and become my best self. Perhaps I would not be living my best life like I am right now. Perhaps I would have been too afraid of the family's reaction to have stepped out in faith and become an old Catholic priest. Perhaps. So despite all of that homesickness and missing that part of being home, I've taken the best parts of home with me, really. So instead of focusing on what I perceive as missing in my life, I can decide to focus on everything that has unfolded, every instance where God has been with me through some hilarious times and through some god-awful tragedies and losses. I'm old. I'll have Medicare in a couple months. So excited. I don't know much, but I know this. God has not abandoned me. God will not abandon you. We can choose how we're going to feel about this life. We can choose to dwell on the things, the half-empty glass, the things we wish we had but don't, or we could just choose to be strong and courageous, to not be afraid, to not be terrified, and to trust that the Lord our God goes before us, not leaving us, not abandoning us, not even for a moment. And it is in choosing to believe that and embrace that, I think, that always brings me back into the present moment where I can choose to be strong enough, because I remember how God has always been there for me. And God will continue to be there all the time for me until I come once again home. Pray with me. Loving, mighty Father, Mother, God, we come into your divine presence in this moment, grateful for the gift of home, for all the times we have felt a deep connection to other people and to places where it was evident to us that you were the master of our life. Help us today, especially those of us living far from family, to celebrate the fact that you are always offering us connection, companionship, and fellowship with others. Help us to remember that there are two kinds of family in this life, the kind we are born into and the kind we give birth to ourselves, the family of our choosing. If we are feeling far from our best self and disconnected in any way, help us to choose connection. Help us to choose to remember all the times in this life when you have, through your grace, shown us that we are precious, that we matter, and that we have no reason to fear or to be terrified, because you go before us. You will never leave us. You will never abandon us. And for that, we offer our gratitude. Amen. God bless you today.